We are live on the air, episode 3 with Ty Simpkins. I'm Max Tenberg. In today's episode, we have a special guest, our good friend, Joe Baldwin. Joe, how are you doing?
I'm doing good.
So today we will be ranking our top 10 favorite Pixar films, okay? So that goes from, we can't rank all 24, I think it's whatever it is. That's too long. So we each have our 10 favorites. We're also going to give our honorable mentions. If you stay until the very end of this live stream, we'll be doing a Q&A. So please put your questions in. We'll be answering all of those questions at the end. Also, if you're just joining us for the first time, please hit that like button. That really helps with the algorithm for YouTube videos. If you're new to Max Talks Movies, hit that subscribe button, ring the bell for more notifications on upcoming videos. So let's just start this on a good note. Everyone's going to give their 2 to 3 honorable mentions. So Joe, you're our guest. Give us 2 to 3 movies that you really wanted to see on that top 10 list, but because Pixar is so great, you couldn't fit it onto your list.
All right. I'm going to start with one, which I really wish I could have fit on the list, but just looking at it, I didn't think I had a strong enough argument, which is Toy Story 4. It has the same strengths as all the other Toy Story movies, and arguably looks the best out of all of them. But the trilogy, those 3 movies together, the first 3 are so good together that it's just kind of hard to fit 4 in there, and that's why it doesn't make my top 10. And then probably the most controversial pick, which isn't even in my top 10, honorable mention, is Cars. Not 2 or 3, the first Cars, because I think it gets a lot more hate than it deserves. I don't think it's one of the greatest Pixar movies, but I think it has. I connected to it when I was young. It has a very interesting message about slowing down, not taking competitions too seriously, which I really needed to hear when I was a kid. There are a couple other ones, but I think these 2 were the ones I was really considering putting on my top 10, but I decided against it.
Ty, give us. You're on mute, by the way, Ty. Okay, I'll go first. You want me to go first, Ty? Okay, I'll go first. Let's go through I'll give you 3 honorable mentions. My first one is Wally. People love Wally. Wally, for me, is the most overrated Pixar film, and I enjoy it for what it is, but I don't love the film. Other films I wish, Incredibles 2, I really wanted to see on this list. I'll talk about that film, maybe down in the top 10. And then my last one is Onward. I really enjoyed Onward, but it wasn't like top 10 Pixar for me at all. So those are my 3 honorable mentions. Ty, before we give our top 10, what is your couple honorable mentions?
My honorable mentions is probably A Bug's Life. That was Pixar, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I really like that movie. Definitely not one of my favorites, though. But I think it deserves a shout out. And then also Incredibles 2.
Yeah. All right, so let's get started with our top 10. And this is how it works. It'll be like Joe will give his 10, Ty will give his 10, I'll give my 10. We'll keep going. We'll pinball our way down to our number 1. So, Joe, what is your number 10 Pixar film?
My number 10, I switched this around a couple of times. I have Finding Nemo, which is a great Pixar movie. Unfortunately, I didn't get to rewatch it recently in order to discuss it in this ranking. But I watched it a lot when I was a kid. I know that I really enjoyed it. I think it has good humor and a lot of emotional depth. Probably too much to understand when you're a kid, but much more when you watch it when you're grown up. I have it at 10 because, again, I just haven't seen it as recently as some of the other ones on my list. But it was a huge part of my childhood, as a lot of these movies are. And I think it has a great amount of emotional depth and coming of age, which is one of my favorite types of movies. So,
yeah, that's a great one. I'm sure we're both going to talk about those. Ty, number 10 is?
My number 10 is Wally.
Oh.
I really enjoy this movie. I think it has a lot of funny moments and a lot of nice touching moments. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely not my favorite, but it makes the top 10.
My dad agrees with you. Wally rocks. I disagree, but that's okay. My number 10 is A Bug's Life. Now, a lot of people have A Bug's Life in the bottom half of Pixar for some reason, just because people compare that to Ants, obviously. But I always preferred Bug's Life over Ants. That was never really a conversation for me.
Ants always weirded me out.
Whenever I rewatch Bug's Life, I have crazy nostalgia for it. Like, it just brings me back to my childhood of watching it when I was like 4 or 5 years old. And Flick is one of my favorite characters in Pixar. I'm in the lead role, and Hopper is a top 5 villain for me in Pixar. I was kind of wondering why we would never see a Bug's Life 2, but I guess it's because people aren't really on the side of A Bug's Life. But I'm always a huge Bug's Life person, and I was happy you gave him an honorable mention, Ty, because I do love that movie. Joe, we're moving into number 9 here.
Number 9. I don't know how controversial this is. I have Up as number 9.
Uh-oh.
It's a great movie. Don't get me wrong. It's a great movie. The opening scene, it's one that I rewatched in order to make my ranking a little more official for this.
Mm-hmm.
The opening sequence is objectively one of the most heartbreaking things you'll ever see. Like, everyone told me it's so heartbreaking, and I hadn't watched it in a while. I was like, it can't be that heartbreaking, and it is.
Mm-hmm.
It absolutely lives up to the hype of that opening montage. And the rest of the story is really nice. It has like classic adventure elements, but for me, I can't quite describe it. It didn't have that same connection that a lot of other Pixar movies have had. Like, it didn't have that. It has an emotional gut punch, but it didn't have one specifically to me. And again, this top 10 that I have is like, it would change given the day of the week, but Up was one that I watched when I was a kid and I just didn't remember it that well. And I rewatched it, and it's a great movie, but it doesn't get that far up on my top 10.
Yeah. I don't think it's controversial. I think a lot of people love Up as well. Ty, number 9 is?
My number 9 is Inside Out.
Oh.
I really like Inside Out. I think it has a great message, and I think it deals with a lot of issues for kids watching Pixar can appreciate. I really liked it because the main character, Riley, I think her name is, right?
Yeah, correct.
Moves across the country, and that's what I did when I was younger. So, I went through similar things of missing home and being homesick and stuff like that. So, that made it a little higher up on my list. So, yeah.
And I'm on the same page as Ty. Inside Out is my number 9. I love Inside Out. The Bing Bong is a character that on paper you probably wouldn't really enjoy, but the emotional thing, and these are spoilers, so we're going to get into spoilers for all these movies. Bing Bong's death really hits hard in Inside Out. And I think also just the idea of that is so clever, and Pixar it could have been so dumb, and it didn't really, but Pixar just nailed the emotion. And for you to care about Riley really isn't the main focus of the film. While she's there, it's all about what's inside of her head. But the fact that you can even gravitate to her, it just shows you how great filmmaking Inside Out truly is. I think it's one of the more underrated Pixar films, in my opinion. We're going into number 8.
Can I say one more?
Go right ahead, Ty. Go right ahead.
I also like it that you can revisit it and still find something there that you can relate to. Like, I rewatched it recently, and it's dealing with a lot of like I said earlier, like growing up and stuff like that. And going back again, now that I'm moving on to the next chapter of my life, I was able to find stuff that I was able to relate there. So
I agree. You get new things out of that movie every time you watch it, and that's why Pixar is great too in general.
Yeah, that's all Pixar movies, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, Joe, your number 8 is?
My number 8. This was not going to be my number 8 originally, but number 7 just edged it out. I have Toy Story at number 8, which is Toy Story, the first one.
Max is pissed.
No, I'm not pissed. I'm not pissed at all. I was just asking the first one.
I love the Toy Story franchise. Like I mentioned Toy Story 4. I wish I could have put it on. And I don't want to spoil too much of the rest of my list, but the original one, I like it. It has a great story and introduces you to this wonderful cast of characters. But when I rewatched them all more recently, it felt it wasn't one of the more emotional ones. It has its moments, and I can't emphasize this enough. I love Toy Story, but I don't connect. Again, same thing with Up. I just don't connect to it in the same way that I do to some of the others on my list.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Solving Problem Students is a great question. We're going to answer all of your questions, by the way, guys, at the end of the video. So keep putting in your questions so we have a lot to talk about at the end. Ty, your number 8.
My number 8 is also Toy Story.
Okay.
I think it's a great movie, and I really he's so mad.
I'm not mad at all.
You're doing a great job hiding it, Max. But
I'm not mad at all.
That you have a.
You're so angry, dude. So I put it there just because I don't relate to it really at all. But I think it's an amazing movie. And I think it's really fun. He's so mad.
I can't relate to that at all, but what a movie.
It's so good. It's just like I don't think of it like that. You know what I mean? I'm not like I'm gonna watch this and get something out of it. I watch it to watch it because it's entertaining. It's a good story. Mm-hmm. It's good characters, and you know, you throughout that franchise you fall in love with those characters and you're sad when they leave or anything like that. And it's great storytelling. It's just not higher on my list only because of that.
Mm-hmm. My number 8 is Joe's number 10. I think it was Finding Nemo is my number 8. A lot of people have this as their number 1 too, and I can see why. But I just connected to more films in the Pixar world. I really love this movie too. I just think the father-son relationship in the film is really touching and very relatable. If you have that type of relationship with your dad. The villains are really great. The sharks are great. The turtles are some great additions as well. It just looks great. I mean, the movie came out in 2004 or 3 or so, around those lines, and it looks great. Like, it holds up as one of the better looking Pixar films to this day, I believe. While Finding Dory isn't in my top 10, I think this is a significantly better film than Finding Dory, and executes a more simpler story. And just it's more of an adventure film too, as well. That people don't talk about. It is an adventure film too. Just the father looking for the son is great as well. So Finding Nemo I love Finding Nemo, but I just can't get it there because I don't have as emotional of an impact as other films. Top 7 here with Joe at number 7.
All right, I feel like this is probably the first direct contradiction I've had with you guys. You guys are sleeping on Wally. I have Wally as number 7.
Okay.
And I will admit, I have a recency bias because I did just watch it last night. But I loved it. It was hilarious. It's a very well crafted movie. You could almost argue that it's Pixar's silent movie. Like, the main characters have a very limited vocabulary, and the other, like, the humans who are talking, I mean, they're talking, but they're not as big a part of the story. I think it's an amazing combination of a story about the environment and hope, as well as a very touching romance and love story. And I honestly, watching it last night, I laughed more than I had at a lot of these Pixar movies, mostly because a lot of the other ones I'm just crying. But the physical comedy in Wall-E is outstanding. It would be higher on my list if not for the fact that the world that it portrays scares the hell out of me. Like, the idea that humanity would become blobs staring at screens, especially because they came up with that before iPhones. Like, that, it would be higher, but it scares me, and I don't want to think that it would be real. But it is very realistic.
Especially during these times, too, right? I mean, everything kind of comes too close to home, right? When you're watching it, especially during this time, right, Joe?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Ty.
My number 7 is Toy Story 2. Again,
we're on the same page. That's my number 7 too.
I do not really relate to it that much. as like other Pixar films or really at all, but I think the story is amazing. I like it more than Toy Story 1, obviously. And I think it's a really fun film with Al's Toy Barn and the two buzzes when they go at it. That's a great scene. The prospector is great. So yeah, I just and you know, we get introduced to kind of like the full what do you call that?
Team.
Like, yeah, the full team in the second one that we really see for the rest of the franchise. Which was you know, really great and nice and fun.
Yeah, Toy Story 2 is also my number 7. I do love this movie. Jessie, who's really the main character that gets introduced in the franchise. She's one of my least favorite characters in Toy Story, but for me, they actually nail her the best in 2. Especially I think one of the more underrated songs is when she gets left by her owner. It's so brutal. Yeah, it's so brutal. And you feel it because it's so relatable, like how you can a lot of kids just leave their toys around and just forget about them. You know what I mean? And it hits home as well. The prospector is an interesting character. I'm Your Father with Zorg at the end with Buzz is hilarious. And always works. But yeah, I think I just don't think it hits as hard emotionally, I would say, to other films that I would say on this list. It does hit, as I said earlier, but for me, it doesn't hit as good as other Toy Story films later down the road, I think, hit emotionally. Number 6.
Okay. I have so many flies buzzing around me right now. Number 6, I have Ratatouille. Ratatouille was a Pixar movie that I watched maybe like half of when I was a kid, but I don't think I ever sat down and watched it until a couple months ago. And it was really good. I can't exactly describe how I connect to it, but it has a very interesting message about artistry. The idea of how you can put together art in all these different ways, especially through cooking, which is not regarded as much of an art, but you can really see it in this movie. I will also say that, spoilers, Anton Ego's review of the main villain being that touched by the meal and his review at the end almost brought me to tears. I'm not afraid to admit it. I cry during Pixar, and I enjoy crying during Pixar. Yeah. I really enjoyed it. It doesn't make it farther up the list for reasons I'll get into later, but I think it's a really good movie and probably one of the more, it's hard to say because I know people who love Ratatouille would not argue that it's underrated, but to me, it was underrated for so long. And then someone told me it's really good and I watched it and I agree.
Before we go to Ty, I just want to step in too, because I'll just do mine before Ty's. My number 6 is Ratatouille as well. I love Ratatouille. It always makes me hungry. Like the same, like every time I think of adding 2 different flavors together, I think of when, the strawberry, whatever that moment was where Remy's brother, that I always think that when I try new foods and try new flavors, that's always what I think of. Linguini is also such an interesting character. Just like his arc is so great that, his house really is not that great. It's kind of rushed in. He just got put into this situation on luck, really. And then he gets to be with, the woman at the end, and he gets to have a new friend. It all works out. And it's that Ego's twist where he eats the food. It goes back to him as a kid. It always hits me hard emotionally. And I think everyone too. Ego's one of the more underrated villains because he really isn't a great villain until that last third act scene. And the food, it also looks great. Again, pictures do look great, and it looks like it's real food. It looks like Ratatouille. So all of that just works, and that's why it's my number 6 as well as Joe's. Ty, is your number 6 that as well or no?
No, it actually didn't make my list. That I should have said that as an honorable mention. My number 6 is The Incredibles. I think The Incredibles is an amazing movie. It's a lot of fun. It's a great take on superheroes with kind of them getting sued and being made illegal and stuff. I thought that was really interesting, and you know you want to. It's not a Vin
You wanted me to
Diesel.
do a Vin Diesel one last week. I didn't want to do it. All right, Ty, sorry.
I can do above that your impression. I think
All right, save it for the end. Save it for the end.
So yeah, I mean, I like the timeline that it's set in, and kind of the weird like futuristic past world at the same time. You know what I mean? Like in the 60s, in like the 50s and 60s, but with all like the futuristic tech and stuff. I always thought that was really cool. So yeah, that's why it's my number 6.
Cool. And we're about to get to our top 5 Pixar films, guys. This is where it all matters. Keep putting in your questions, guys. We're gonna have a lot of time for some Q&As. So put in as many questions as you want about Pixar only. Okay, we don't want to do completely off topic, but stay to Pixar. And also hit that like button. We're at 9 people watching and 7 likes. Let's get up to as many people are watching, get that many likes. Let's keep doing that. Number 5, top 5 Pixar films. This is where it could get interesting. Joe, what is your number 5?
My number 5 is Inside Out. And I don't.
Bob Voyage.
I really. What's up?
How about?
Okay, Inside Out.
Sorry.
It's a great movie. I did not. Inside Out would have gone way lower on my list if I had only gone off of the first time I watched it. But again, I watched it more recently, and it's literally messing with your emotions directly. It's really good. It has a nice lesson. I think, like Ty was mentioning, Riley as a character, you can feel her problems. I'd say it's not specifically about this, but it does have a lot of elements of anxiety of being a new person at a new school, which I have done a couple of times, and it's always just kind of weird. And I think I never, when I watched it for the first time, I just didn't understand the ending. I was like, how can you be happy and sad? And then 3 years later, I watched it again. I'm like, this is my life. Yeah. You can be happy and sad and mad all at the same time. Also, Bing Bong is one of my favorite one of my favorite Pixar characters of all time. Dressed up as him for Halloween 2 years ago, which is really hard. And as mentioned earlier, his death scene is it hits you hard, and it has a very interesting message about childhood, which is like where's the line? Where do you lose that element of wonder, or how do you maintain it through the rest of your life? And that's a theme I'm going to talk about later on my list as well.
Good. Ty, your top 5 beginning with?
My number 5 is Monsters, Inc.
We are on the same page again.
Love Monsters, Inc. It's such a good movie. It's so fun. And Randall, such a good villain. Mr. Waternews, such a good villain. And the friendship between Mike and Sully is great.
Yeah, Monsters, Inc. as well is my number 5. Once again, this has crazy amounts of nostalgia for me. Sully and Mike are easily one of the best duos we have in Pixar. Randall was such an interesting villain throughout. Even the snowman, that hits me the most with nostalgia. John Ratzenberger's cameo in Monsters really is great as well. But just like the idea of the screaming, Boo also is a character that, and people were bringing up the Pixar theory in the chat, and we'll talk about that after in the Q&A, but she's a huge part of the Pixar theory as well. But she's such a great character as well. And her relationship with Sully is amazing, emotional. That last scene where he basically sends her off back to her room, like, really hits you hard every time you watch it. So Monsters, Inc. is my number 5. Joe, your number 4?
My number 4 is Onward. I love Onward.
I didn't know
Recency bias to be damned. I loved it, and I feel like this is an important part for me to say, which is when I walk out of movies, I typically say, yeah, I liked it, and then over time I sort of deconstruct why I liked it or maybe why I didn't like it as much. Coming out of Onward, I thought it was a great movie. I recommended it to everyone I could because we all saw it together.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
And like we talked about it, and Max, you said it wasn't in your top 10, but I had a feeling it was in mine, and just going through it, I was like, it still lasts. This is not a diss against Cars, but Pixar, like, that is how you make an audience feel for a car when you send it off like that. I cried when the truck crashed into the rocks to save them. That was a beautiful moment. And the last moment where you sort of realize with Ian how much Barley, I think I got the names right, has had an effect on him throughout their life. That was brilliant. Plus, I think it has a lot of good comedic moments. The dragon is by far one of my favorite Pixar villains. That's kind of a joke. Kind of. I really liked it, and again, I'm trying to admit my biases where I find them. It was the last movie I watched before quarantine, so I saw it really recently, but I still think it will hold up, and I think a lot of people are not, because of quarantine, are not seeing it as clearly.
Yeah, I mean, it's on Disney Plus, so everyone can see it now officially. So everyone should go be seeing that. I agree. Everyone should see that movie. Ty, you're number 4.
Before I say that, Joe, I've never cried in a Pixar film. I almost did an Onward, but I've never cried in a Pixar movie.
I let myself cry. The gallop and everything. It's a beautiful scene.
Yeah.
So my number 4 is Up. I love Up.
Well, I'm the only one who doesn't have it in my top. Okay.
No. I love Up. I think it was a great movie. The dogs are so funny. I don't know the villain's name, but that's funny. The relationship that
Months.
has with his wife is it's great. You know what I mean? Like even after she's dead, it's awesome. And it's like he still loves her so much, and his relationship with Russell is really sweet too. And we dive into Russell's personal life a little bit more and see that there's some sadness there with his family and tragic stuff there. So yeah, I think it's a great movie.
And Kendall Nangle agrees with you. I started crying halfway through Onward and did not stop.
I see you, Kendall Nangle. That is exactly how I felt, although I didn't cry all the way through because I wanted to see it. Exactly.
Yeah.
Clearly.
And I agree with Joe too. I really did enjoy it. My number 4 is Toy Story 4. The reason why this is so high up for me is because I didn't really know how good this movie would be. Now, obviously, the franchise, the 3 movies are fantastic, but it feels like a 4th was kind of stretching it because 3, and I think we're all going to probably talk about 3 soon, ended on such a great note that it didn't really open up for a sequel following 4. And then you saw Forky in the trailers, you're like, what is going to happen? I mean, this does not look good. And then Forky probably stole the first half of the movie. And then my new second favorite character in Pixar is Duke Kaboom, Keanu Reeves. Every time he's on screen, I was bawling out, laughing. And I think this is also the funniest Toy Story movie we've gotten so far, where I don't remember any of the Toy Story movies where I was just like laughing throughout. And this movie kept up the laughter. And it was Woody's story, and Woody's my favorite character. So like it was his story throughout the film. And people don't like it because Buzz was kind of a real sidekick in this movie where he's not really in it as much, but it's Woody's story to be told. And it made me realize why this film had to happen. While heading in, I didn't think that. So just off surprise and how necessary it became, that's why it's my number 4. But it could be controversial. Yeah. Thanks. Joe, do you want to talk before you do your number 3?
Well, yeah, I did wanted to just address you on Toy Story 4, which is, I think it is a great story about Woody, which is why it makes my honorable mentions.
Yeah.
But this will tie into my next point.
Yeah.
The reason it didn't make my list is because it is only Woody, and I think there was a YouTube channel I watched that did a review that said if you called the movie Woody, it would be a little more accurate. It's not all of the Toy Story, and that's kind of where it loses me, because I love the cast of characters that it's created, and the fact that a lot of them are just sidelined, even though like the new characters are also pretty great. You miss out on a lot of those dynamics, and you only get snippets of it. That said, my number 3 is Toy Story 2. Toy Story 2, I would have to say, is probably my first Pixar movie, or at least the first one that I can consciously remember. Like, I know that I technically watched Toy Story, but I think it scared me a little too much as a kid, so I always moved to Toy Story 2. So it has a deep nostalgic impact for me, and I will acknowledge that it's not the most well-crafted Pixar movie, but I really enjoy it. It brings in Jessie and Bullseye, who aren't my favorite characters, but they fit in perfectly. And the opening scene of Toy Story's opening scenes are all great, but the opening scene of the Buzz video game is always something I just kind of remember, and it gives me chills, and I don't know why. Plus, I love how the dynamic in the first Toy Story is really just Woody and Buzz, and then they separate those two characters, which is often a mistake that sequels make, that they separate the two characters that have the most character interaction, and that kind of makes it worse. And it actually really works for this. It sort of shows how strong their friendship is. I could talk about it for a really long time. The scene where Woody is being restored is also such a satisfying moment. It is a very crazy artsy moment, which is not something I have a whole lot of on my list, but that's something that sticks out to me. I could talk about this for a really long time, but yeah, Toy Story 2 is my number 3.
And I want to agree too. I want to step in before Ty goes, that the point you made was brilliant. The fact that they separated the two characters that made the first film work. I mean, that takes a lot of guts to do that, because at the time, obviously, Pixar only had 2 films before Toy Story 2, and they already went back to a sequel, and it does work because they separate them. You learn a lot more different things because they're separated, which is a great point by Joe. Ty, your number 3, top 3 here.
My number 3 is Cars. I love. Max is pissed.
I see you. I did not have the balls to put Cars in my top 10, but I understand that.
I love Cars. I mean, it's so much fun. It's like, not talking about the movie, I enjoy Cars a lot. So it's really fun to see that world coming into play, and the interactions that these people have. And I like that you have this, like Joe said, the story was it's kind of taking it slow and thinking things through kind of thing. I see that message. I always took the message as take it down a peg. And just kind of like check yourself and to remember where you came from, and remember like who you are, and to not let an ego get the better of you kind of thing. And that's always, even though it might not seem like it has always helped me kind of stay me and stay who I am throughout the years of kind of just being in those big movies. It really did help me kind of stay true to myself and stay me. And above all that, it's just a fun movie. I mean, it's about race cars. So
yeah. And I don't get mad at anyone. I just think it's interesting because Pixar just hits everyone differently. That's the greatness about Pixar, is that everyone just has their own things. My number 3 is The Incredibles. For me, The Incredibles is easily top 5, maybe in top 10. Top 10, maybe top 5 superhero films of all time for me as well, not just in general. It's such a different superhero film than we get. That it's, even though it was made in the early 2000s, it feels like a throwback superhero film that works in modern times and still holds up in 2020. The family is so great as well. And the villain has a great motive. Syndrome has a great motive. Now, people, obviously, he's basically the same villain as Riddler in Batman Forever. But he has a different in on that is because he's Incrediboy in the first act. And gets completely thrown off by Mr. Incredible the whole first act. And then he turns out at the end, the reveals of Jack having powers at the end always works. You're always satisfied when, even though it's a pretty violent moment in Pixar, when Syndrome dies, it's very satisfying. The machines, that black machine, I don't know what you call that. It's so cool. Yeah, and Michael Giacchino is my favorite composer. Gives his favorite, my opinion, his best score in Incredibles. It's such a throwback score as well. The reason why Incredibles 2 isn't in my top 10 though is because the villain is so predictable that it just pulls me out of the movie at times. While I love the idea of switching up the dynamic of Elastigirl and Mr. Incredible, the villain just, it's coming a mile away. And she isn't as good of a villain as Syndrome was. So that's another point, but that's why Incredibles is my number 3. We're in top 2 range here. Joe, what do you got?
I swapped number 1 and 2 so many times in my head. But in the end, I had to go with my number 2 as Toy Story 3. 3 is Toy Story 2. 2 is Toy Story 3. This is where I can talk about all the Toy Story movies now that I've revealed where they place on my list. If you could combine the Toy Story trilogy into one entry, that would be my number 1, hands down. It's so well done. It's such an interesting point about, again, childhood, which I really like because a lot of my interests are more childish and a lot of people grew out of them earlier than I did. And I never understood it. I was like, this is so cool. Why would you ever grow out of this? The opening scene of Toy Story 3, one of my favorites. Just the imagination of a child and how the rules keep changing. I love that. I watched, before I watched Toy Story 4, I watched all 3 Toy Stories in order, and those 3, they just keep getting better. That's like Toy Story 1 is great. Toy Story 2, just a little bit better. Toy Story 3, amazing. And there are a lot of great moments between Woody and Buzz and the rest of everyone else. Lotso isn't one of my favorite Pixar villains, but his sort of mob boss control over the story adds a very interesting adventure element or like suspense to what is otherwise an extremely emotional movie full of a lot of goodbyes. And the incinerator is hard to sit through, especially when you watch the movie and you know that's coming, and you see throughout the movie they have this sort of image of Buzz extending his hand to Woody to shake it, to like say, we're moving on to the next chapter, and Woody never takes it until they're in the incinerator. Yeah. And I'm almost tearing up just talking about it. Yeah. And the Andy goodbye as well is a very well done thing. He doesn't keep them. He doesn't store them in the attic. He passes them on, which is a very beautiful message about how to treat your childhood, which is, it is gone, but it's not forgotten.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Perfect. Ty.
My number 2 is Finding Nemo. I love, and this one, made the running for number 1. I did have to think about it for a long time until I saw my number 1. It was my number 1. And I'd honestly say these 2 are tied. But Finding Nemo is definitely one that I relate to and I love watching, and the soundtrack is amazing. The visuals are great. So yeah, I love Finding Nemo.
me and Joe are on the exact same page here. My number 2 is Toy Story 3. This is just an amazing film because it feels like it's basically thanking you for being on the journey for the last 2 films. Lotso actually is my favorite villain in the Toy Story films, just because of his motive throughout, which it does seem like a one-note motive that he just gets forgotten about, but he does come into play. The twist works. Ken is one of my favorite characters too, because Michael Keaton's one of my favorite actors, but Ken and Barbie's relationship is so funny. It's so funny throughout the film. And just the reveal that the daycare isn't really great, you know? I mean, they get roughed up in the early parts. And also just Woody's responsibility. Like he feels like he has a responsibility to go to college with Woody, but also to be with, you know, his friends. And it kills me every time when he puts Woody in the go to college box and everyone else in the trash. Like it really hits hard because that's what the situation is. Woody's the leader of the group, and Andy's goodbye as well also really hits hard. And that's what's great about the trilogy too. It's really Andy's story. You really grow up with the trilogy with Andy, which is what growing up in our generation is, that we're really Andy from the first movie. We're Andy, then we're old enough to be Andy's age in the second one. And now we are really now at the third one. So it just hits harder the more I grow up, in my opinion. And now we're going to get to in our opinion, the best Pixar film. There's a lot of options. Joe, what is your favorite or best Pixar film?
My favorite. I'm very careful never to say best because there are so many well-crafted movies on this list alone that if I picked craftsmanship, I'd have to rearrange everything. My number 1 is The Incredibles because of how much it connects to me. If Toy Story 2 was my first Pixar movie, this was my first love of Pixar, which is I've always loved superheroes. Like I read comics, I watch the all of the movies, and it is kind of hard to see now how there was a point where, you know, superhero media wasn't what it is now.
Yeah. And
a lot of people, I mean, even now people are saying, oh, the superhero bubble is going to pop. Like superhero movies are lazy. And this is such a good example of how a superhero movie can be about superheroes, but it's also so much more. It was really someone, like when I watch it now, I think it's someone saying, you're not stupid for thinking that superheroes are deeper than just people in tights. But when I was a kid, it was probably one of the first superhero pieces of media that I'd ever watched, and it was great. It had kids who were like, oh man, I'm a kid. What would I do with superpowers? It had awesome fights with the Omnidroid and Mr. Incredible. It had spy scenes with Elastigirl. It's so many different genres. It's a family movie. It's a superhero movie. It's a spy movie at times. I remember whenever I'm watching the movie, there's always the moment where the Omnidroid is about to pop out and surprise Mr. Incredible. I always know where it's going to be. I always know exactly the moment, and I still get scared every time because it's just so startling. You really go on the journey with the characters. You understand every person's perspective. You understand why Mr. Incredible wants to keep doing superhero work. You understand why Elastigirl wants to settle down. You understand why the kids are anxious and sort of more rambunctious. Not to mention, honey, where's my super suit? Which is one of the top moments of Pixar, probably one of the most quoted. Frozone is a great character, and like he doesn't have too much on the main plot, but you still love him. And Max, like you were saying, Syndrome's a fantastic villain, probably my favorite Pixar villain. The twist where he reveals himself, his awareness sort of superhero tropes. Like, you got me monologuing. There's so many things that I love about it, and so many of these movies I could just keep talking, but I'll turn it over now. My number 1 is The Incredibles.
Ty, your favorite Pixar film is?
My favorite Pixar film is Onward.
Wow.
Yeah, I see. I knew Max was gonna
No,
have
no,
that
good for you. I'm not mad at all. I'm just saying,
Right.
wow.
Max is so angry right now.
I'm not.
Like, bro, he's so pissed off.
I'm not.
No, so yeah, I love Onward. That is the closest Pixar movie I've come to crying in. And it wasn't just gonna be like a little tear. Like I had to hold myself back from sobbing in that theater. And it it's such a good movie. The brother relationship they have, and the ending when what's Tom Holland character's name?
Ian.
Ian.
I think it's
When Ian is holding back the dragon, and he sees his dad and his brother interacting. Like it's just so heartbreaking, and like I really didn't think. I thought that they were gonna somehow find a way to keep the dad alive or something, but no, he went back to being dead, and he realized that he didn't need to meet his dad because Chris Pratt's character was filled that role already, and yeah, it just hit hard, and I was like, wow, it's awesome.
Yeah. No, I love that. I remember talking to you both about Onward after we left, and you both it hit harder a lot for me. I mean, I hit hard for me too, but you guys really loved it, which is great.
I am going to be honest. The rankings totally make sense. Max, you out of the theater, you said it's not in my top 10. Ty and I both kind of said it was, and
yeah.
I could tell that I loved it, but Ty felt it even more than I did. So this placement, this makes exactly this. I feel the conversation we had afterwards totally lines up with this ranking.
Exactly. And my number one is the original Toy Story, for sure. I never even thought about putting 3 over 1 for me. For me, I've never watched a film. Toy Story 1, I have goosebumps and chills the whole movie, in my opinion. Well, for me, there are just little scenes that take me back to what I was doing when I was little, and it hits me really hard. I think Sid is also a character that doesn't really get talked about enough. He seems pretty one note in the beginning, but once Woody and Buzz go into his house, I mean, he becomes a much more thought out character. His relationship with his sister, Scud gets involved. It's so fascinating, and how Toy Story breaks around 1995, making this type of film, looking this great. It still holds up, in my opinion, the animation from 95. The characters are at their best, in my opinion. The whole montage of Buzz being brought into the equation. It hits hard if you have a sibling or something or a friend, and or something happens in that situation where someone is new, gets brought in, and they get all the spotlight. Like, it's super relatable for me, at least. And Woody's a very relatable character for me. And Toy Story is my top 5 favorite movies of all time. It just hits me hard every time. I get chills every time I talk about it. And the relationships between all the characters are just at their peak, in my opinion, in this film. So that's our Pixar rankings. We have Ty for 2 more minutes. Joe and I will stay on for an extra 10 because now it is time for Q&A. So you guys are going to be asking us questions. Pixar only, okay, for the most part. And we'll talk about Pixar. If you want to talk about a movie that we didn't talk about, please put that in, and we'll talk about that movie as well, because we didn't get to all the movies. So for sure, do that. So let's get started with a Q&A. We've heard of the Pixar theories, right, guys? Have you guys heard of the Pixar theories?
Yeah.
Well, there's a very big difference there. Are you talking about the Pixar theory or just Pixar theories in general?
Well, let's just say I think everyone knows the Pixar theory, right?
Yeah, I know the Pixar theory.
Yeah. There's a lot of theories. That's what's fun about Pixar. Cars 1 is actually pretty good. See? So Lucas agreeing with you. If you could, let's make this a Pixar kind of question. If you could be a character in a movie, who would you like to be? So let's say if you want to be a Pixar character, let's make it Pixar oriented.
Lightning McQueen.
And I would be Woody, if I could be one character. And then who would you be?
I want to think about this.
It's a good question.
I'm going to say I can go a lot of different ways. My immediate answer, Buzz Lightyear. The confidence and also just the ability to seemingly to follow with style.
Yes.
Never fail to delight.
Yeah. It's a good one. Solving Problem Studios. Does anyone else support the theory that Bing Bong was Riley's monster when she was little? after Monsters Inc. began using laugh energy, of course. That's an interesting take. Joe, you look like you want to go first.
I've heard something like this before. A couple different theories, like who was Riley's monster. After hearing this, I do support the Pixar theory. I think it's a wonderful theory. But I would think that Bing Bong was not specifically Riley's monster. I would say something that looked like Bing Bong was Riley's monster, and then she sort of filled in the gaps of the darkness and sort of like added the cotton candy, the crying tears, because I think there is something really wonderful about the child's imagination of Bing Bong, and she definitely got it from somewhere. So I think the Monsters Inc. is awesome, but I would say that Riley created the Bing Bong we know using a monster as like a base plate.
That also would make sense because, like monsters in Monsters Inc. are real people, like they're living and walking around and stuff. Whereas, like Bing Bong was a memory and part of her imagination. So yeah, it would have had to have been based off of something. So yeah, I'm gonna agree with Joe.
And I also think the monster could have been like the orange monster. I think it's like Sanderson or something. His name from the first Monsters, who was just like a jokey type of monster who was trying to do scares but wasn't man enough to do scares. It looks like, but I like that theory as well.
It also means Bing Bong is not truly dead, which is pretty great. So.
Exactly.
Before we move on, I do have to go. So thank you for doing the list. So yeah, enjoy the rest of the Q&A.
Yeah, and Ty and I will be doing this more often too. I think Ty and I both like doing this, so for sure.
All
right, see you, Ty.
Bye.
And Joe and I will stay on for the next 10 minutes doing Q&A style format here. Let's keep doing this. Ratatouille is a masterpiece. You know what? I really do agree. I don't really find flaws with Ratatouille at all. I gotta find my next place. I should. What would be a good movie if it existed in reality? Well, in Pixar, let's do a Pixar version of it. Well, Wally is kind of what we're kind of going through now. Wally's a little more extreme, but I feel like that's the closest thing we've had to a society today, I would say.
I will go back and say that if Wally was in reality, it would be a terrible movie because it would be so depressing.
So depressing.
So depressing. I would argue you can't say that Toy Story is not actually happening. I mean, there's no way of figuring it out.
Or Inside Out.
That's true.
Inside
Out. That one I'm a little warier of saying that could be real because that means that somebody else is in control of your actions and you're not responsible for anything.
Yeah. Fair. But yeah, great question. Are Pixar sequels really necessary? Well, it depends on the franchise. Were the Cars sequels necessary? No, they were just made for money reasons, especially Cars 2. But like, for example, I think Toy Story sequels build on each film. Incredibles 1 set up a sequel. So we were kind of waiting. That's why it took 14 years. I mean, we were kind of waiting for an Incredibles sequel. But Monsters University, was that necessary? Probably not. We don't really need to know the backstory between those two, I don't think.
Here's the way I see it. I would say no, flat out, if it weren't for the Toy Story sequels. And also for the fact that I had been asking the world for an incredible sequel ever since the cliffhanger in the original. And then in the end, I watched it and I liked it, but I think Incredibles as it is kind of stands on its own.
Yeah.
What I see a lot of Pixar sequels being is they feel more influenced by Disney. Like Disney as the parent company sort of pushes for sequels in order to keep the characters alive and relevant, but the stories always feel just a little less than when it comes to like the emotional punch. Yeah. That's how I describe a lot of Pixar movies, the emotional punch. Yeah, I would like Brave.
And I also think people are getting tired of seeing the same character. I think, like, for example, you guys really loved Onward too, just because it was so fresh to see a new original story from Pixar. I think that's why Soul is so exciting too. because it's just a new original Pixar film. I don't think we always need sequels to enjoy Pixar.
Yeah, but I will say they're not always the highest quality, but there is something about keeping the Pixar characters that you and I grew up with in the mainstream for new people to grow up with and them to think like, oh, maybe I should go back and watch this movie. So it is, I understand the company behind, I mean, obviously it's for making money, but also just a little bit like keeping those characters alive, because not everyone has the same experience with those characters.
Yeah, no, I agree. Let's keep going. We've got a lot to go here. Onward is my favorite too. You know, people, I've heard mixed things about Onward. I really like Onward. I just can't love Onward. I think for me that the mom and the Octavia Spencer's character doesn't seem to be so necessary to go back and forth between, in my opinion. But that's only my nitpick with that movie.
I would say just about Onward, which is, I think, because I talked, Max, we've talked, which is, the trailers did not do it a lot of justice.
It had bad advertisement too. You know, it was just bad.
Is way better than the trailers have ever described it to be. Like, I had a lot of friends who were like, yeah, I'm not going to see that. That doesn't look good. And I had to say, no, you have to see it. It's great.
Yeah. And for me, it's Pixar, so I'm seeing it regardless. But the advertisement was bad. The trailers didn't hook me too. You know, I wasn't excited. It didn't feel like a Pixar movie in the trailers, but it turned out to be one when you watch the film. Why does no one ever know? Never know the Remy's name? I don't know. I don't know what that means.
That's the rat. You didn't say Remy as in.
Oh, I see. Yeah. You can imitate. Can you imitate a Pixar character? I can, but Joe, can you?
Yeah, I can. Let me think of one.
Yeah, we can. I'll just keep going through. We can save that for the last thing we do. Clips before time. Did you guys like? Okay, so here's a film we didn't talk about: The Good Dinosaur. Joe, do you want to start with your opinion?
The Good Dinosaur is at the very tail end of my ranking of everything. I like The Good Dinosaur's effects. It is a fantastically animated movie. It looks beautiful. I just don't like the story. It is really the tail end for me.
It's weird because I think the actual animation might be the best, but then you look at the dinosaurs and they look like a cartoon where like a river, like the river, for example, looks like it's a real river, but then you go to the dinosaur and it looks like it's out of a Saturday morning cartoon. So like, I don't know. It was kind of confusing. I think for me, The Good Dinosaur is just a forgettable movie. It's just a film that I never think of when I think of Pixar. And no one, and also,
I remember.
And it shows because the box office, it did bad. I mean, for a Pixar movie, I mean, people just didn't see the movie because it doesn't feel like a Pixar movie whatsoever. Joe, you go.
I remember it mostly because I'm like, this is at the bottom of my list. I know there's the sequels. They're all the sequels besides the Toy Story ones, which I have mostly in my top 10. There are all the sequels in the middle, but Cars 2 and The Good Dinosaur and Brave. I don't remember Brave really at all. I thought it was a Disney movie for a really long time. Those are at the end of my list.
Those are my bottom 3 as well. Let's go to Kendall. The Incredible sequel was a huge letdown. I'm not sure it was a huge letdown. I'll talk about a film too. For me, Incredibles 2 was really good because they completely changed the dynamic between the family. Now, Elastigirl is going on a mission, which is different from Mr. Incredible in the first one. And Mr. Incredible is now in the stay-at-home parent role, which I think was nailed. And the animation looks amazing too. Again, the villain just pulls me out of the movie. At times, Bob Odenkirk's character was good, and the necessity of superheroes too. But I get your point, but I still really love the movie.
Yeah, I will say that key superhero, the supervillain aspect of Syndrome. Syndrome is such a huge part of the original, and having a villain that just doesn't match up is hard to say. Yeah. But also, I would like to be fair, which is the Incredible sequel had 10 years of buildup. There were 10 years that everyone wanted. The hype is building, and it's hard to imagine a world in which they would have made an Incredible sequel that would have made everyone happy. I liked it, but I
see the
sort of
flaws
agree.
with it.
My top 10.
Yeah, I see the flaws with it, but it's still I feel it's still a good movie. It still feels like we're back where the original, and also it set up a lot of spin-offs because it just added so many more superhero characters. You know, we got introduced to a lot of new characters that I think could be used in spin-off fashion. COVID hurt Onward. I was going to see it, but Onward is actually the last movie I saw in theaters, and we saw it on March 6th. And we're about to head into August soon, and that is insane to think about. They haven't been in the theater in like 4 or 5 months. Like, it's crazy. It's depressing
We
to
saw
talk
it
about.
when it came out.
Huh?
We saw it when it came out. Like,
Yeah, we saw it
day
the
of.
first day, yeah. But it's on Disney Plus. So, and COVID did hurt Onward box office wise, but it got Disney Plus. So, guys, see it. We're definitely recommending it to you guys. What do you think about The Incredibles? Well, Nandy, Joe thinks it's his favorite Pixar film.
Number 1.
And it's my number 3, and it was on all 3 of our top 10. So Brave was a Pixar movie. I know. Can you believe that? It
Right.
feels like Disney. It feels like it's just a Disney film. Like Pixar, it doesn't feel like Pixar at all.
She is officially a Disney princess.
Yeah,
like,
which is crazy.
It's a princess movie, which I don't have anything against, but you know.
And that and The Good Dinosaur for me, like, well, Cars 2 is memorable just because it's so bad, but Brave and Good Dinosaur, like, you don't even think about when you think of Pixar. Like, it's so forgettable, in my opinion.
Here's what I'll say about Cars 2. When I was a kid, I was like, oh, a spy movie with the Cars characters. That's fun. And then looking back on it, I was like, yeah, it's a terrible movie. I was old enough to understand Brave and The Good Dinosaur, and I was like, what's this trying to do?
Yeah. And Ben, my brother says, what is your favorite Pixar short? That's a good question.
Lou.
Which one?
Lou.
Okay.
L-O.
Man. Bao was a really great one before Incredibles 2 because Pixar shorts didn't really hit me emotionally, but they were good. Bao was so emotional, especially going right into Incredibles 2. Like, I couldn't, like, it was such great, I don't know. Bao probably would be my favorite. It's also the animation, like filming them making the dumplings is so spectacular.
Max, you think Bao's emotional? I watched it sitting next to my mom.
Oh, yeah. No, I saw it with my family on my birthday. I saw Incredibles 2 on my birthday. I was like, oh my God, This is a train wreck. And then can we get your one impersonation before we go? Because we're out of questions here.
I just because I never get to talk about this, I do want to say a little bit more about Lou, which is the Lost and Found short for anybody who doesn't know.
Yeah.
I think it's a very underrated short because it came before Cars 3, I believe.
Okay.
But if you haven't seen it, I would definitely recommend it.
There's a lot of good ones too. And I mean, there's the Jerry's Game, which perfectly set up Toy Story 2. We kind of talked about that earlier. And the I'm trying to think of it. The Cloud one is also really great.
I don't know what that's called, but the one with the storks?
No, it's like where a cloud's like a person. Like, not a cloud, but the cloud has like feelings. Like, it has an eye and it has a mouth, but it's a cloud. I forgot what it's called. I think it's called Partly Cloudy. Like, I love Brave, but it's not a Pixar movie. I'm biased because I played a Brave game at the Wii. Yeah, I don't really love Brave, though. I can't really get to that. I can't even say it's a good movie, to be honest with you. Let's end here today with Joe's imitating one Pixar character, and that's how we're going to end the show. Joe, all you.
All right. I saw a request for Max to do this, but I think I might be able to pull one off.
Bon voyage.
Buzz Lightyear to the rescue.
Oh, there you go. Can you do a bon voyage?
Or, huh?
Because John Paul was asking
Mr. Incredible.
He's cameoed in other movies too, by the way. Bon voyage cameoed in a lot of Pixar movies too, not just Incredible.
I don't doubt it.
Yeah.
Any other requests? I haven't done any of these before, so.
Yeah, I'll give it 2 more minutes. If you guys have any last questions or any impersonations that you like from Joe, we'll stay on here for 2 more minutes and we'll see what you guys got. We have 7 people watching. All of you guys better hit that like button, and it's great. We have 11 likes, which is fantastic for the amount of people we had. And if you're new to Max Talks Movies, hit that subscribe button, ring that bell for notifications on all my upcoming videos. And if you want Joe to keep being on the show, you got to tell me in the chat if you want Joe to keep coming back. And Joe, would you be interested in coming back?
I would definitely be interested in coming back. I'm in the middle of nowhere right now, so I only get to talk with people every once in a while.
And also,
I can give you.
tell us what franchise you want us to rank next. I mean, we can do DreamWorks animation, we can do Illumination, we can do Disney itself, we can do other franchises, live action franchises. So there's a lot.
Have you guys done Marvel yet?
We haven't, but I'm not sure Ty can do that, dude.
Oh, yeah, right. Sorry.
We can do Spider-Man films too. We can do Spider-Man films too. Yeah, we can't do MCU, and also MCU is also 23 movies. We basically we each did 10 movies, and that took 45 minutes. So,
that's true.
Yeah. All right, we haven't got anything in, so I'm just gonna call it a day. Thanks for joining us. You can find Ty and my social media in the description below this video. And also, if you're watching this via the replay, also give us a comment. Tell us your ranking in the comment section down below. What are your 10 favorite Pixar films? I'll reply to all your guys' comments. Thank you so much for joining us on the third episode of Live on Air. We'll see you guys hopefully next